Hundreds of bright stars adorned the night sky, and the moon, occasionally peeking from under the cloud cover, illuminated the path to the peaceful town. The only cars that occasionally flashed on the road turned the corner and immediately turned off their headlights, blending into the shadows. However, all of this mattered little to me, a skinny 25-year-old sociophobe, spending my days in a closed apartment, rarely venturing outside. Sometimes, relatives would persuade me to leave my reclusion. Sometimes the groceries in the fridge would run out, forcing me to step out. But most often, it was the annoying grumbling of grandmothers under my window that disturbed my peace. By the way, about my window, that half-rotten wooden frame with glass was right in front of my bed, about half a meter away. If someone walked by it, their shadow would pass right over my bed, and if I accidentally didn't close my eyes, it could scare me quite a bit. Moreover, my bed was pressed against the wall, so I usually tried to stare at the ceiling or the wall. And one more important detail, I live on the ground floor, so perhaps it's not surprising that there's some protection against theft in front of my window, an iron grille, partially rusty and peeling off its white paint. It probably wouldn't hold back a serious thief, but it still creates some illusion of security. So, I've given you the main details, and now it's time to move on to what makes my blood run cold. It started last month. Insomnia suddenly came over me. I visited numerous doctors in my city, spending my last money on sleeping pills, with hard-to-pronounce names and even aromatic herbs that were said to promote instant sleep. But none of it worked, and I kept falling asleep only towards morning, around 4 o'clock. Before, to cope with insomnia, I simply counted the stars visible through the window. I counted about 30 celestial bodies. At least that many were visible from my position. In the end, I simply accepted my unpleasant fate and stopped trying to get rid of insomnia. After all, what's the big deal? I don't work. I don't have a girlfriend, no pets either. My life consists of small circles, my computer, where I spend my time immersed in games or endlessly scrolling through social media. It would seem insomnia, and that's all. And what is all this description hinting at? Doesn't it clutter the memory? I won't deny that it bothers me. Somehow, it seems to me that by describing all of this, it will be much easier for me. By the way, in about 2 weeks, if not sooner, another hitch appeared him. Just him. Now it begins, what I was talking about a few minutes ago. What makes my blood run cold? He comes every night, exactly at 1 o'clock in the morning. Precisely appears. No sounds of footsteps, no creaking, no other signs of approach. His arrival can only be guessed by 2 things: heavy, wheezing breathing and knocking. Knocking on the window. His bony finger slowly, and not very strongly, taps on my outdated window, producing that maddening sound. The outlines of his face are not visible. The hood conceals the details, and the pale light of the street lamp only hints at his opacity and the fact that he is there, outside, in front of the window. His first appearance triggered a wave-like reaction in me. At first, shock and bewilderment. I didn't even know how to behave. Then the desire to go out and chase him away crept in, teach him some manners. But you know why I didn't do that? Because right after the desire came the main feeling: fear. I huddled in my bed, looking at the nocturnal visitor. My heart seemed to start beating only at the moments of his knocks, as if creating an eerie duet. I was afraid to even make the slightest movement, and holding my breath, watched intently as his long finger with unnatural bends tapped on the window. A hazy, misty veil appeared on the glass, roughly where his face would be. It seemed to me that he was attentively observing me and sensing my fear. The next night was illuminated by the brightly shining moon, and when he appeared again, I managed to better discern the contours of his face. A horrifying smile, behind which lay a row of sharp yellow teeth, the absence of lips and a nose. And, of course, the eyes. Eyes in which you see your soul, in the most literal sense of the word, tiny pearls in small eye sockets, stared at me with an unwavering steel gaze. Throughout the time he looked at me, not a single eye blinked. That face was etched into my memory for a long time. Even now, as I write these lines, it feels like if I focus, I can hear that knocking again, along with the heavy wheezing breath. And if I look out the window, I'll see that creature again, but no longer behind the glass, but reflected behind me. This creature visited me for a week. Every time he appeared, I was overcome with terror. On the third night, I decided to turn away from the window and listen intently as the guest started knocking again. He knocked more intensely and aggressively, as if he was annoyed by the fact that I was no longer paying attention to him. I couldn't hold out for more than 10 minutes. Fear took over. I turned to the window and, trying not to meet the creature's gaze, began to examine the window frame. I don't remember falling asleep. Memories became mixed up, and I could hardly recall the endings of any of the nights spent face to face with this nocturnal visitor. It's hard to explain, and why bother? Everything is already quite clear. Besides, by the fifth night, I realized that he was waiting for me to turn and watch, as his twisted finger tapped on the window, making that unsettling sound. And now, another sleepless night. It was almost 1 o'clock. I firmly resolved to boycott this nighttime guest who made me curl up in bed every night and pray for it all to end. Wrapped in a blanket, I turned my face to the wall and waited for his arrival. And then, the first knock came quiet, as if hinting, "I'm here, pay attention." Then came another knock, more aggressive. "Are you annoyed?" I asked him in my thoughts. In response, a loud thud resounded. By the way, as soon as the sound started spreading, I noticed that a strange smell of decay was filling the room, as if something had been lying in one place for a long time and had turned into a rotten, shapeless mass, emitting that repulsive aroma. In contrast, the knocking resonated in my head, bouncing off my mind and returning, like a ball, making me flinch and swallow the lumps stuck in my throat. I was afraid the glass wouldn't withstand the blows, and initially, I was ready to turn towards the window, but my muscles, as if having taken control of their own accord, refused to listen to me. And intuition was firmly warning, "Don't do it, buddy, better not." I decided to heed the advice of my body and began to listen carefully to the knocks, which were becoming more aggressive, breaking the silence in the room. Well, of course, calling it silence would be an exaggeration. The creature's heavy breathing disrupted it much more often than the sounds of knocking. And as soon as the guest disappeared and the sounds subsided, sleep captured me in its embrace, carrying me into oblivion. "I did it," flashed through my thoughts before consciousness faded under the rule of Morpheus. I woke up at noon, my head aching and a dry sensation in my mouth. If I had the money, I would have left this place long ago. Swearing at everything, I got out of bed with heavy eyelids and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. As soon as the glass of desired liquid was in my hands, half of it disappeared instantly, and my eyes began to survey the surroundings. Before my eyes, the events of the previous night flashed back. That terrible fear that had seized me then returned, piercing through my body. Doubts retreated. Deciding to contemplate a plan of action, I made the decision to spend the next night at the computer and headed to my room, where it all began. When the computer was within arm's reach, my gaze fell to the floor in front of the window. A scream got caught in my throat, and the glass of water slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. Now the source of the mysterious, nauseating smell of decay became clear. Right in front of my window were traces of dirty footprints, as if someone had been standing there right by my bed. Oh God, what if I had turned around that night?